I started early. Oops, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to start early. I guess I'll let people know. I didn't mean to start early. Lying in my bed, I hear the clock tick and think of you. Going in circles, confusion is nothing new. Something do 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 is left behind. Suitcase of memories. Time after sometimes you'll picture me. Something do. BB, oh hey chicken, nice top, it suits me too. Thank you, I really appreciate it. That's very sweet of you. I like this. I just got this at Ross the other day. I like it. I like it. I like. I like it a lot. Sorry. I like it a lot. In order to. It's so funny. I was watching this YouTube video, and this British dude was like, every American just has two British accents that they can do. Basically like the low class, like, right, hey there, mate. It's like, and then like the highbrow, like Boris Johnson, like, well, yes, of course, we checked with the House of Commons and hello, Christy Bridges. I'm not trying to do accents right now. Well, I'm glad you're here. I've had Cyndi Lauper stuck in my head. She's one of my mamas. Lying in my bed, I hear the clock ticking. Think of you, running in circles. Confusion is nothing. Bottle of water. Bottle of water. Scottish. Gosh, Scottish is so hard. God, it always ends up just being Shrek. Like, well, that's not very nice. He's just a donkey. You're here for. Oh, hey, hello. It's good to see you. I should have something else here rather than this screen. Oh, yeah, I was going to have transits up here because that's what we're talking about today. That's what we're talking about today. The transits of April. The transits of April. Well, it's kind of good I started a teeny bit early because it gives people some time, and then we can start right away because then we can get to your. I gotta stop playing with my hair and like looking at myself in the camera. I'm like, do I look okay? Is that lipstick even? Can they hear me? Does anyone care? Pink Floyd, hello. Is there anybody out there? Is there anyone at all? Excuse me. I'm like Gollum. Sorry, I'm like Gollum, Gollum. Lung stuff. Coffee, coffee, coffee. So, if you're lost, you can look and you will find me. Time after time. If you fall, I will catch you. I'll be waiting. Okay, we might as well get to it. Where's the chat? Where's the chat? Oh, I have to open it up in a separate box. I always forget to do this. Glad you're doing a live now. Yeah, no, I prefer doing live. I hate editing videos. I'm much better live than I am like recording, and I'm much better live than I am writing because I'm way more interesting in person than I am like mediated through, social media, even though this is sort of a form of social media. Where the heck are you, chat? Where are you, chat? Sign into chat. Open web. Why do I always do this when I'm already recording? It's so unprofessional. It's so unprofessional. So, if you're lost, you can look and you will find me. Oh, wait, no. Windows. I hate Windows. window sucks. I hate doing that voice. That sounds like Mrs. Bighead. From Rocco's Modern Life. If anyone remembers Rocco's Modern Life, then they are friends with me. Well, not necessarily. There's a lot of jerks around my own age, too. So, what are some aspects coming up? We'll just launch right into it. So, right off the bat, we're about to have a full moon in Libra in just a few days. Oh my God, basically like a day, right? And then we have Mercury, who's in Taurus right now. I have a Taurus Mercury. Wait, I don't know if you can see me. Can you see me? Can you see me at all? So Venus in Taurus is going to make a sextile to Neptune in Pisces on April 7th. Oops, and I missed Mercury, excuse me. Mercury in Taurus is making a sextile to Mars in Cancer on April 7th. That same day, Venus in Taurus is making a sextile to Neptune in Pisces, April 7th, right? We just said that. Venus enters Gemini, my fifth house, on April 10th. The Sun conjoins Jupiter in Aries right after April 11th. Venus in Gemini will make a trine to Pluto in Aquarius on that same day, April the 11th. This is wonderful because, they're going to be aspecting all my fun Gemini and Aquarius stuff. So hopefully I get a little lucky, but we'll see. I have to leave the house more for that to happen. So, but I'm doing this crud all the time. Like this little talk here took me hours to write up, but you'll hear it in a second. So we'll go to it's all the stupid news that I get into because I'm a sucker for news and current events and things like that. So of how these things sort of unfold, not just for us, but the community around us. This is oh gosh, stop it. No, I'll get you, Gadget. Mad Cat. Meow! For any of you who remember Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget. I'll get you, Gadget. Okay, where did we left off? Oh yeah, Pluto. And then we have the Venus. Oh wait, hold on. The solar eclipse, which I've been talking about for months now, if you've been following me, because it's just so easy to talk about eclipses. And there's a lot going on. And we look at eclipses in people's charts and the implications in their personal lives, right? So, April 19th, and we'll talk about this eclipse more in depth. And we've already talked about it in depth, but, we'll touch it. We'll knead it a little bit, like dough. So, and then we have Mercury retrograde in Taurus. Oh, lovely. I was born with Mercury retrograde in Taurus. We're a little slow, right? The last people to get a joke in the group. I think I've mentioned this before. It's like someone says, so I say wrecked him. Damn near killed him. And everyone's like, oh, 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 oh. And then we're like, oh, I get it. Yeah, you know? So, and retrogrades make things take longer or delay things. We'll talk more about that when we get into it. And then, finally, we have Mars in Cancer making a sextile to Uranus. Not Uranus or mine, but Uranus. Never gets old to me. And Uranus in Taurus, where he's been for a while now. April 29th. And then right after that, we have some interesting aspects, but they go into May. And this is plenty to talk about. So I'm going to pull up my notes and we'll just get into the Allen thick of it. The Allen thick of it. Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, see? Well, now you can see all my stuff. Well, no, you can't, but... this is the thing about sharing screens. You see? So anyway, we'll get right into... Well, let me see if anyone's saying something first. Hello, chat. Hello, chat. Cool shirt. Thank you, Elizabeth. Any thoughts on how the current transits are correlating with all this tragedy in America? Yeah, a lot. I have a lot of thoughts about it. And I've been saying these thoughts about it for a long time. So these transits that we're focused on are for April. I've got tons of other videos and things where I've talked about the big transits we're going through. Pluto entered Aquarius, right? We had Pluto going through Capricorn, which represents the dissolution of the established order and exposing the sicknesses. Now we have other aspects, right? Saturn just went into Pisces. I've talked about the correlations with that during the 1960s, but especially the 1930s. What worries me about the astrology of the next 10 years is it looks a lot like the 1930s and 40s. So this is what concerns me quite a bit. At least in the 1930s, we had an FDR character here in the United States to keep us away from descending into fascism. There was an actual plot to overthrow FDR called the business plot. Look it up. It was planned by some of the most wealthiest and famous industrialists in the United States, including Prescott Bush, who was George H.W. Bush's father and George W. Bush's grandfather. So you can look that stuff up. Anyway, and there were a lot of American industrialists who were financing the Nazis, along with the Brits, through the Bank of International Settlements. You can look all that up too. It's all pretty much public knowledge, but it doesn't get talked about. Right now, what's happening is we have billionaires funding fascists again, funding right-wing extremists and right-wing extremist groups, and the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire. Maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this, but Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, all these, what's his name, Michael Knowles, talking about totally getting rid of people like me. So there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. Uranus goes into Gemini, right? It's the third Uranus return of the United States. This happens starting in 2025. The last time this happened was World War II. The time before that was the Civil War. So we can already see the shapings of both going on with the Ukraine business and nonsense and the whole Russia thing. And Russia and China, I'm sorry, but we're entering a multipolar world. You can see that with the astrology as well. It's what happens every time Pluto transitions from Capricorn to Aquarius. What the hell? Dial tone? I think it's almost out of batteries. Anyway, what a great way to derail my thoughts. But I've written a lot about this. If you want to see an article I've written about it, check it out on my website, frankielynch.com, and click on the blog page. I also did a video about all this, so check that out, please. Like the stream. Like the stream. Like the streams. Like Ghostbusters, cross the streams. Or, no, it was don't cross the streams, but yes, like the stream. Like the stream. Subscribe to the videos. Go like the other damn videos, because guess what? There's other good ones. Like I said, the Pluto transitioning into Aquarius one is quite good. I need to do one on Uranus. On Uranus. Not on my... Oh, yeah, maybe on my anus, too. I mean, so kinky. But there's a lot of stuff going on. And this is all going to continue probably through 2033. So my astrology, my personal astrology throughout all this is really, really wacky. And I'll talk about it sometime. But Pluto's going to be conjunct my ascendant for a while and cross my ascendant 5 times. Uranus is going to be conjunct my Sun on and off for a long time. Conjunct my Mars on and off for a long time. In fact, he's going to be conjunct within minutes on my birthday to my Sun, on my solar return. And then he's going to station direct on my Sun, right, the next year. So there's lots of fun stuff. And this is within minutes, so anyway, yes. Oh, hi, Lizzie. Yes, hi. But yes, there's a whole load of wacky astrology, like big transits going on, right? These are outer planets doing all kinds of things. And you don't look at outer planet transits in your personal chart. I mean, when they make transits to each other, right? So people who say, oh my gosh, Frankie, can you tell me what my Neptune sextile Pluto means? Not much for you in particular, because guess what? They've been sextile on and off since the Korean War. It doesn't mean anything for you. Don't worry. Chill out. Transits feel close to returning. I've certainly got some research to do. All the hatred of the American people bubbling up in the past 3 to 7 years. I mean, that's part of this too, right? Now, part of it too is all the stuff transiting Taurus, right? Uranus has been in Taurus for a while. Resources get precarious. We have a water crisis in the United States, especially the Western United States. So, parts of the Rio Grande have been drying up. Lake Mead, yeah, is insanely low. So these things are sort of ominous situations or indicators, right? Hello, Ashlyn. Hi, good to see you. And of course, food precarity. The United Nations says by 2050, 60% of the Earth's population, 60% of the global population, won't have enough access to clean drinking water. Now, I didn't want to talk about all this because I hate going off on all this. I'm the queen of doom and gloom. Thank you, sweetheart. Ashley, I appreciate it. I'm usually the queen of doom and gloom. So I don't want to be like that because that's not a good way to get. We need to be inspirational to each other. It's funny because Albert Camus said that happiness is absurd, right? He said, why should any of us ever be happy? It's like Sisyphus being happy rolling up the ball up the hill in hell. And the ball rolls back over him every time. So why should we be happy? Well, happiness is fleeting and it's ephemeral. Joy is something different. Joy, as one of my mentors said to me, it's a note, it's a sound that comes from the soul, whatever that means. I think of it as something that's always in the background. Like, with the Big Bang, they say in physics or astrophysics that we have what's called the cosmic microwave background that's always there. It's like a remnant of the Big Bang, the initial exploding of all things from one point. At least that's the theory, which seems very congruent, doesn't it, with esotericism, which says that everything issues from a common source of divine origin, everything issued from the one. If you read Madame Blavatsky, The Secret Doctrine, she describes cosmogenesis, and it sounds very much like the Big Bang and all that sort of thing. So everyone should take a look at that. I have my own issues with theosophy now, but I spent 16 years in it, or at least studying with it. And there's a lot of good stuff you can take from it. And we'll have to do a whole episode on theosophy sometime because it really did have a big impact on the world, an influence on world politics. So we won't get into it. We won't get into it. But suffice it to say, there is some very, very big astrology going on. One thing I didn't mention was Saturn conjoining Neptune in 2025 as well, in Aries, where Saturn's not happy. So we have a lot of indicators of very distressing things to come. Excuse me, and one thing that scared me a little bit, because there's a whole cross-section of the population that doesn't like me very much, what scares me a little bit is that Donald Trump is going to have a level 1 peak period in terms of zodiacal releasing. You probably won't know what that is, or most of you won't. Some of you, I'm sure, will, but zodiacal releasing is an ancient predictive technique that we use. And Donald Trump is going to have a level 1 peak period in Leo, right? That's his first house. So it's a very powerful thing. So that scares me a little bit. And of course, my mommy is Marianne Williamson. Marianne Williamson is my mommy, and I love her. And please, she's already polling at 10%, right? Like this early, that's a big deal. So, like Bernie wasn't even at 10% at this time in 2016. So, if I recall properly. Let's get into the astrology of April. Why did you have to ask me that question? Asking me a question is like asking me to explain something is like holding a very addictive substance in front of someone who's very addicted to it. I don't know if I can say that on I almost said TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, right? I'm like my parents with social media. Like, which one are you again? Which one are you? Okay. Bringing up my notes here. Wipe my notes. Wipe my notes on your face. My notes. You're a Scorpio stellium, so you don't really know you're alive unless you're staring into the abyss. Well, we all have an idea of what the abyss is until we really see it, don't we? So, Facing the cessation of consciousness is terrifying. The idea that consciousness could just cease. You've never known a time when you weren't here, have you? So, I don't mean to be grave about it, but it is. I've spent a lot of time with death. The greatest adventure. The greatest adventure is death once again. Pull up my notes about this stuff here. That's from the old Hobbit from the 70s. So, anyway, let's talk about some of these fun things. First, we have the full moon in Libra, April 5th. Well, it's a full moon. This isn't the eclipse, right? But this is our monthly lunation here, our full moon. And we know that lunations represent beginnings and endings. So we think of new moons as beginnings. So when you work with the new moon in your little spell work and rituals, right? It's where we set our intentions about what we're going to cultivate, like we do a garden over the next month. And then at the full moon, we harvest or reflect on how we've cultivated, right? If we've been working on a specific quality or little goal or whatever. You know, some people give themselves something for their own personal or self-development to focus on for a month. I typically try and do it for 6 months because the longer you stay with it and focus on it, the more refined it gets. It's a whole other thing, you know. But suffice it to say, rather than, you know, spending a lot of time with your vices, when you try and develop a virtue or put your attention on it, you're vitalizing that thing. You know, something that's not so personal, right? It's because the personal dimension is always what causes violence. That's what it is. It causes violence of all sorts. You know, Christ said, if you, right, you know, you've heard thou shalt not kill or commit murder or what, I don't know if I could say those words. Thou shalt not, you know, unlive someone. Hopefully that doesn't get in trouble here. Anyway, but he says, you've heard that, but he says, if you've done it in your thoughts, you've done it, you know? That's the whole thing about energy follows thought. And the intention, you know? You got evil in your heart, you let it out. You know, I mean, it's there, right? A good man or a good person from the good treasure of their heart brings forth that which is good, right? As you are, so is your expression. As you think in your heart, as you are. A bad person from the bad treasure of their heart brings forth that which is bad, right? Should be obvious, but this is esoteric wisdom, right? I don't believe in anything necessarily, but I get a lot from the Gospels. I really do. I quote them like the devil. So anyway, you see beginnings and endings. Now, this might be particularly important to you if, excuse me, if it happens in an angular house. Excuse me. If, you know, say the moon is in Libra and the sun is in Aries, and those are angular houses in your chart. So, which would mean you'd be one of the cardinal signs. So you'd be Libra, Aries, Cancer, or Capricorn rising. So that would be an angular house for you. It's lime water. I love lime water. Okay, well, moving right along. So Mercury in Taurus, sextile Mars in Cancer. This is April 7th, just a few days later. Wait, well, in that case, we're all going to hell. Well, I don't know about going to hell. You know, I always say that. Now, let me say a couple positive things, because there's a lot of positive stuff. Saturn going through Pisces also brings very positive developments, right? We get faced with very difficult stuff. We get faced with truth because we've been living in fantasy. Saturn makes us face things, and in Pisces, it's clearing the fog. Now, you'll see demagogues. You know, I mean, Hitler issued the Nuremberg laws while Saturn was in Pisces. At the same time, FDR put millions of people back to work and got us through one of the most difficult periods in United States history. I would love to think that we could have another FDR through this period, but again, no one looks likely except for my mama, Marianne Williamson, who, I mean, let's hope that she gets a chance, because the alternative doesn't look good. I don't want to talk about this so much that I upset people, but think about it like this. People failed a major test in the 1930s. Many people did. Many people passed a big test in the 1930s. It's so shameful to think about it like that as a test, but that's sort of, the angle that some of them take. I mean, stuff just happens. The law of accident. Yeah. Astrology is about not learning how to change things necessarily, but learning how to face whatever comes. Vidius Valen said that God gave us this power to tell the future, so that not we can change it or make it better, but that we can learn to face whatever comes with a greater sense of equanimity. That means not being moved. That means being less personal, being more detached, as the Buddhists would say. So, now on that token, during these difficult times, my grandfather was a World War II pilot. He flew a fighter jet when he was 18 years old, killing Nazis. His whole squadron was shot down over Italy. And he was the only one left returning back to base, and he passed a German jet. And they both just let each other go. They were both the last people from their respective squadrons. So, and there, he helped escort FDR to Yalta. So, a lot of interesting stuff. A lot of my friends, because, I'm in a spiritual group, they're older. A couple of my friends from Geneva, they lived through the war. And it was just amazing, but people lived. The thing is, they lived through these things. And we have to go on living. And you know what helps? It just sucks for us Americans because we're so isolated from each other. But community, friendship, making connections, relationships, these are social technology. These are Aquarian. This is how we, right? Pluto was an Aquarius during the French Revolution. That was the Pluto and Sagittarius generation that did that. Maximilien Robespierre was Pluto and Sagittarius. He was also Aquarius rising like me and lost his head when Pluto crossed his ascendant. So, but you see the theme. It was about union and challenging everything. You see, in community and connection and relationship are what going to see are going to see us through. A great practical example are labor unions. And you can tell I'm Aquarius rising because I love labor unions. There's actual peer-reviewed evidence and articles about this. I'd have to check the peer. I've seen the articles though, that labor unions actually substantially decrease racism, homophobia, transphobia, all these things, because when you're part of a union, those are your brothers and sisters and envies and whatever else, your siblings that you're fighting alongside with for your rights and for your common interests. You're facing tremendous opposition. And that's what the whole Pluto transition's about. It's about the decline of one power and the ascendancy of another. And we've entered a multipolar world, like I said. And you will see, just like with Britain after World War II, you'll see the economic decline, probably, and general power decline and prestige decline of the U.S. on the world stage, just like happened to Britain. Britain was able to rely on the United States, right, to help it through. The United States, if we were smart, we'd be trying to be nicer to Russia and China, because China is sort of the big deal coming up. And this isn't a value judgment, it's just sort of objective. The Belt and Road Initiative alone is going to economically give them a leg up over the whole, Asia Minor, and even into Europe, Eastern Europe especially. They've already been doing tons of infrastructure work in Africa and South America. Not always with good results, but you see how they're actually instead of invading these countries, they're sort of trying to build them up and get on their good graces. But this is all other stuff. Yes, we are all one. Unity, love is the answer. Yeah, but we can't be wimpy. You can't be wimpy. And love isn't sentimental. Love isn't nice. Love isn't kind. Remember the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna was beset on both sides by armies, people of his own family. And he lamented the fact that he would have to fight them and end their lives. Krishna appears, right? Sort of symbolic, right? He's sort of like the Christ figure, symbolic of that love of God on the one hand, and almost like the soul in us. And Krishna says, "Yo, bro, get over it. Pull out your sword, get on with it. Stop being a wimpy, and do your duty as a soldier," right? Because they were going to take him out if he didn't take them out. And then there was this larger dispute. But you see, that's called the Kurukshetra battle. I'm probably not saying this right because I don't know Sanskrit. I mean, just the westernized versions. But you see, that battle is symbolic of the battle we all go through, not just in the outer world, but within ourselves. But hugs did not win World War II. We didn't win World War II by hugging Nazis. And they weren't to be reasoned with anyway, because they were coming off of complete irrationalism. It's irrational because it's based on fantasy, just like the whole notion of making America great again is based on fantasy. And the desire to do that comes from the desire to go back to a time when you could abuse weaker people with impunity. And they don't like that they can't anymore without some pushback, and they call it woke. Woke. When woke really meant just being aware of racial prejudice and injustice. That's what it originally meant. And it's been turned into a derisive and divisive term. But it's only divisive because a big cross-section of the population don't like the fact that other people are getting visible. Especially people like me. We are sort of the big scapegoat right now. Apparently, after one person committed a major crime, all of us do, right? And every crime is based on that. Even though over half of all of these shooters have been, straight guys. So, was that it? Yeah. Or was it what? No, over half of the shooters have been white people. Like over 80% have been straight people. Cisgendered straight people. So, like, what the heck? But again, white people, are we going to say, oh my gosh, we need to take all their weapons away or whatever? I mean, it's complete nonsense. So anyway, I just need to mention that because it's important. So, but just to give everyone a bit of hope, after every one of these Uranus and Gemini transits, we usher in the most progressive time since then in history, or in U.S. history in particular. But in general, because after World War II was one of the most progressive eras worldwide. That's when everyone got national health except for the United States. Or, especially the Commonwealth. Britain established, the top marginal tax rate in the United States was 90%. It was the most prosperous time, the 1950s and 60s. The purchasing power of the US dollar reached its zenith, its highest point, in the 1960s, when the minimum wage was something like $1.65 an hour. So that's when the dollar reached its peak purchasing power. Anyway, so moving right along. Oh, but the word of hope is besides the most progressive era, is there's always stuff that we can do, right? Love is technology. And I said love isn't sentimental, but it is compassionate. It's the awareness of our interdependence with each other. That's what love is. It's the progressive, budding, or unfolding awareness of your interdependence with me, with thee, with thou, with them, and the rest of existence. Bit by bit. There's always a greater whole. There's always a greater sun to revolve around. You see? So anyway, but that all comes by, eventually learning to loom less large in our own consciousness, which comes through self-observation and consequent self-realization. I haven't gotten there, but I've spent many years on self-observation, and I'm still a terrible bitch. So but I'm a lot less so, believe it or not. So anyway, Mercury in Taurus. What are some key words for Mercury in Taurus? So he's slowed down a little bit. Now we know Mercury rules news, communications, how we communicate, whether it's letters, the internet, or television or radio, right? Um, and then Mars, who's in Cancer, is very, very unhappy. Mars represents OMG of, yeah, I know, exactly, me too. I've done terrible things in my thoughts. But we have to be honest with ourselves about them. The most important thing is to be honest with ourselves about our motives and, what we've done and why we do it. The two most important things on a spiritual path, I've said this plenty of times, are complete, brutal honesty with ourselves and a great fucking sense of humor. Because if you can't laugh at yourself, you are. So, I can only say it once or twice on here, like an R-rated movie. So anyway, Mars is unhappy in Cancer. He gets resentful. He bottles himself up. But Mars is conflict, violence, struggle, injuries, illnesses. When I think of a theme for Mercury sextile Mars, I think of protests. I think of people reacting. I think of martial communication, right? Mars, Mercury, martial communication. I think of allegations too, exposing crimes, things like that. So one of the last times this happened was July 5th of last year. We had the big conflict over the abortion rights. And Roe v. Wade had been overturned in June. So of course all the conflict ensued after that. People were making their voices heard. People were pissed, and rightfully so, and we should still be pissed. Yeah? So, for whoever asked that question, we're talking about some astrology here that relates to these other cycles. And we'll see these over and over and over and over again, these faster transits. Yeah. So, sorry, I talk with my hands. Gemini. Talk with my hands. So, anyway, protests. Excuse me. December 3rd, 2014. Massive protests once again after a grand jury chose not to indict the police officers who ended the life of Eric Garner. They used a chokehold on him and he stopped breathing. That was one of the first times we heard "I can't breathe," which, later was used with George Floyd in those protests. But the fact that this gets repeated indicates that there is a problem. And a bigger problem is that a whole cross-section of the country thinks it isn't a problem. And this is why we say Black Lives Matter rather than all lives matter, right? Because all lives are not being specifically targeted at a higher rate. You see? So Thomas Jefferson once said, "There's nothing more unequal than the equal treatment of unequals." Does that make sense? When you treat people who are starting off at unequal circumstances, and you treat them equally, they're going to be unequal. You see, you're going to be reinforcing their inequality, which is what the law basically does. And if you read Federalist Paper number 10, written by James Madison, 17 whatever the heck, he says the primary function of government is the protection of a few people to acquire property, right? Basically the protection of wealthy people's property is what they stated the primary function of government is. Protecting property rights. So you can see kind of what the intentions were from the get-go. Anyway, so massive protests over that. And then, right, remember 2016, November, right? The election. Trump gets elected. The whole world erupted into massive protests. And guess what was happening then? Mercury sextile Mars, once again. So, how does this affect you personally, though? Well, now think of Mars significations with Mercury, right? Mercury is sort of in the superior sextile. So this is something we'll talk about with aspects when we do a whole video about aspects, or a live, I guess. A live stream. A live stream. About, I'm sorry to my UK friends. It's terrible. But a live stream where we talk about aspects. Anyway, but we'll talk about superior and inferior aspects, which are very important because ancient aspect doctrine is a bit different, than the modern conception of how aspects work. It's almost simpler, it's simpler but more nuanced at the same time, and less wishy-washy. So, but you see that Mercury is going to be in the superior position. So, and it's a sextile. So there's a certain harmony going on. Mercury is testifying to Mars. Mercury is saying, yo, Mars, we need to make our voices heard here. We got to get, and Mars, responds by getting mad by these ideas. So you can expect sometimes upsetting news. Not necessarily that's bad, but that gets you riled up, right? Sometimes injuries, things like that. You don't want to speed. You don't want to get in road rage, stuff like that, because sometimes violence is involved. When it's Mars, you can have sudden illnesses, getting sick. Watch out for arguments, of course, Mercury and Mars. Righteous indignation was another phrase I came up with, right? Well, this isn't right. We need to change this. You should hear me trying U.S. accents. I know, Kirsty, it's fine. OMG. Oh, yeah, I already said that. Fight fascists everywhere. If peace is disturbed, there is no peace in being harmless when you're under threat. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. Now, Christ also said, live by the sword, die by the sword. But living by the sword is what fascists do. It's guiding your life by violence. It's like violence guide you in violent thoughts. The root of all evil is separativeness. It's separation, right? Which, manifests outside as selfishness. So the whole idea of purity and all that is selfish. The idea of trying to impose your values on other people is selfish. You see? And people do that to maintain power. Pluto's all about power. Saturn, was the original power buddy. Saturn was originally the power broker, if you will. But Pluto is now. And we have significant Pluto and Saturn transits going on. So there are big issues with power. Power struggles. And we'll see lots of interesting transits going on with Pluto bit by bit as this all unfolds. So, Vladimir Lenin said there were times in history, right, where weeks happen over centuries. Right? Everything's just kind of plodding along. But then there's those times in history where centuries happen within weeks. That's one of the times we are in. Notice how we forget the news within a month, except when it involves transgender people. Then people are uncannily remembering it and invoking it all the time for a sort of separative nonsense. And remember, hate comes from evil, which is based on separativeness, which is the root of fear too. So it's the fundamental misconception that we are this separated self in the world. That's where pain comes from identity. We physically feel pain. But the notion of identification with the physical body makes it so much more acute because we are that pain. We identify with it. We say, I am hungry. I am scared, right? Those things become us. We're identified with them. And that's what self-observation is all about. It's learning to stand back, to look, to see our identifications, to see that they're conditional, that they are dependently arising, and that we sort of steal them from life. and put them on like overcoats or masks that we approach life with, and we take them to be us, right? I say this stuff all the time, you know. I'm a trans girl. It's going to die with me, isn't it? It's an identification, right? I identify as a trans girl. Ultimately, I know that it's a fleeting condition and that it doesn't have any substantial reality. But it works for me this life. It's how I feel about myself on the inside, and I'm able to better navigate life and feel happier and more at ease in my own skin this way. I can still acknowledge and be aware of the fact that ultimately it all dies, it all decays, and it all will just be a memory. But what is here? What is now? It's always in the background. It's always in the background. Whatever it is, and it's not an it. It's more like a space, right? The soul has no bells and whistles. It's not. It's not like a big party. Like, oh my God, there's the soul. Illumination can feel like a slap in the face, but it's also so subtle and quiet. But these are other things. We should get back to the transits. I'm sure all of that's sort of interesting, though, to some people. Because if you pay attention to me, you're probably interested in sort of the esoteric and spiritual stuff. I've been in the midst of an existential crisis about it all for the last few years, but, you know. So if that is interesting to you, that's wonderful, because at least we'll have all this stuff recorded, you know. So anyway, we talked about, oh yeah, look at what houses these planets rule for you, Mercury and Mars, and that'll give you more indications of how this affects you personally. Oh, standing up for yourself. Priestess Shakti, you came. Lovely. It's wonderful to see you. Like the stream. Hit the button. Thank you. She always says that for me because she's lovely. You are such a sweetheart. Thank you. And standing up for yourself, it's another key word or key phrase here. Standing up for yourself, learning to say no, right? No. Am I still here? Can you see me? Can you see me at all? See, I haven't been watching the camera. I have too many screens open. Too many screens. There we go. I'll do it like that. I'll do it like that. I like it a lot. There we go. So anyway, where are my notes? Where are my notes? Oh, yes, you see me. Very good. Thank you. Back to my notes, because we got to move on to your filthy charts. Your filthy charts. Oh, wait. Yeah, this one. I got so many notes here. So anyway, Venus in Taurus is making a sextile to Neptune in Pisces on April 7th, so same darn day. So, you know, we have an interesting confluence of forces here. So Venus is quite happy in her home of Taurus, of course. What does Venus represent for us? Well, beauty, love, art, music, charm, desire, acquisition, getting what we want. I mean, Mars is getting what we want too, but it's more the active way. The active side of desire. Now, what about Neptune? What's Neptune? Well, deception, fantasy, intoxication, but also spiritual aspiration, idealism, and the articulation of a vision of what's possible. Right? Like St. Paul said, where there is no vision, the people perish. Oh, excuse me. Now, a big theme I think about with this sextile is hope. Hope. Interesting word. Now, you know, Lao Tzu said that hope and fear are essentially both phantoms that arise when thinking of self. The idea of optimism or pessimism is really sort of a selfish thing. But we live in the human world, and we're dealing with human emotions, and we're learning to see things clearly. So hope is a very apt word here. I also wrote down creative imagination, creative inspiration, expression of ideals through art, but also deceptive outer, you know, the book, the cover of the book, which may not indicate what's in the book. Deceptive aesthetic is what I said, or deceptive appearances. That's a better word, or better phrase rather. Deceptive appearances, not what they seem. And I picked that phrase, or I noticed that phrase too, because one of these transits was December 4th, 2022. And that's when a new stealth bomber was revealed. I believe it was by Northrop Grumman, or one of, the big five defense contractors. So there's Northrop Grumman, there's Boeing, there's um what Booz Allen, right? Can't remember him now. Boeing, I always remember Boeing and Northrop Grumman. Ugh, it's gonna kill me. Anyway, there's a bunch of them. But the interesting thing, too, to me, given all this hope stuff and spiritual idealism, was that Raphael Warnock won his Senate race against, um, who was it? I can't remember who it was. And it doesn't, oh, it was that one guy, a really abominable human being, very nasty man, accused of doing all kinds of nasty stuff to spouses and girlfriends and all kinds of nasty things. Meanwhile, Raphael Warnock is a preacher. How Neptunian, how Piscean in a way. I mean, I don't treat the outer planets as ruling anything, so Neptune does not rule Pisces to me. But you see this, the sort of energy or quality going on there. Because what was he doing? He was articulating a vision for the future. And he was doing it in a spiritual dimension or connotation. He was doing it with spiritual emphases. He said in his acceptance, or his victory speech rather, a vote is a kind of prayer for the world we desire for ourselves and our children. Voting is faith put into action. Have you ever heard a more Neptune Venus kind of thing? This is the hope articulation. Now, another funny thing about the word hope with this transit is, guess who was elected in 2008 during this transit? November 4th, right? Barack Obama. Or as you UK friends would say, or at least in the news, Barack Obama. At least the news people. I'm sure the Cockney types are like, oh, Barack Obama? Let's in on the cheesemakers. Monty Python. What's he saying? Blessed are the cheesemakers. Anyway, I'm sure tons of you have seen Monty Python, The Holy Grail. Or no, not The Holy Grail. I'm sorry, Life of Brian. Life of Brian. That movie was banned in some places when it first came out. Christians were up in arms. They were pissed. How dare you satirize the life of Jesus? Kirsty Bridge is laughing. Yeah. Yeah, blessed are the cheesemakers. Anyway, so now the key phrase of Barack Obama's election was hope, right? Remember the big old signs that said hope? Of course, it didn't end up that way. He didn't really do anything for people. He was a great orator. He could move a crowd. Like, he could get people moving, get people worked up, but he didn't really do anything. I mean, the Affordable Care Act was, it was good. I mean, it got millions of people health care, but it didn't have a public option. And it definitely inflated the insurance industry. And almost right away, they've been challenging parts of it ever since. So anyway, but again, the phrase hope, whether or not it ended up like that is a whole nother thing. Some key phrases for you expressing your sense of values and beliefs. So, but in a harmonious way. It's not the arguments of Mars Mercury. It's the dialogue. It's the feeling. It's the mystical, like, oh, okay. Who is that, like, hippie trippy person in Beavis and Butthead, the teacher? Or I think he was in Daria too. Beavis, Butthead. We need to talk about our feelings here. and express some conciliatory energy towards each other, that kind of thing, the hippie trippy whatever. So it's not like trying to assert your views or values, but expressing them in a beautiful way, in an aesthetic sort of way. So the inspiration to create. Now, if you write a wonderful poem or draw a wonderful picture, it should be an expression of an inner condition, right? Something perhaps that you've realized, that sound or note of joy within you, something of the background, something perhaps that you realized. Even something very abstract can carry that force or presence or energy, can't it? Think of Jackson Pollock. Everyone thinks, oh, it's just splatter, splatter, blah, blah, blah. But when you go view these paintings, there's a feeling, there's a force, there's an energy or quality behind them. It wasn't just random splatterness. There was a methodology. There was there was a thought. There was inspiration. There was force behind it. There was energy behind it. There was intention and quality behind it. So you see, we always make fun of Pisces and stuff as being so dreamy and nebulous and ethereal, but that can have intention, and that can have strength and beauty at the same time. So anyway, and then I wrote down a vision of optimism or what's possible, right? Like hold out have a little bit of hope, especially during some of the crappy times. Like it'll get better. This too shall pass. It always does, because nothing stays the same. A vision of optimism. I also put contemplation, like being a little metaphysician. What is the meaning here? Let me think. Let me go inside myself. Another phrase is romance. Having romantic thoughts, feelings, not just romance in terms of sexuality, but romance in terms of idealism also. Romantic thoughts, romanticizing things. So Venus enters Gemini on April 10th. So I wrote down some key words for Venus in Gemini. Variety. Taste the rainbow. All right, Skittles. Which is sort of ironic because my daughter told me, and I think I looked it up too, that Skittles are really all the same flavor. It's just they changed the scent and color, which sort of fools our brain. But I swear to God, those red ones are the best. The red ones, the red ones, the purple ones, the grape ones, and then I don't know, orange and lemon. Like I would eat those quick, so I had the rest, all the other three flavors. I think that's all there is. Anyway, even Skittles are controversial, probably. I know M&Ms and chocolate are controversial. Like, dude, get over it. Talk about snowflakes. Just leave us alone. There are also tons of trans people that are really pissing me off. Like, people have to post pictures of themselves holding weapons are absolutely stupid, you know? And people who do, like, menacing TikTok videos. I know we're scared. I'm scared too. But giving the other side ammunition is really stupid. Really is. Anyway, you can tell I'm like the conservative-ish trans person. I mean, if there is such a thing. I don't mean conservative politically. I mean like, hey, let's sort of dress semi-normal, and I shouldn't go off on all that stuff. It's just I really want us to be taken seriously, and we should be taken seriously. So anyway, Venus in Gemini, right? Some other words. Uh, Inclusion, non-judgment. What's very interesting, my darling? Oh, what? That I'm not so wackadoodle about things. I mean, I am, but I'm not going to go out wearing a mohawk and purple hair and stuff. I don't think purple lipstick is that wild, you know. Usually, like, I just wear leggings and a t-shirt and a hoodie, you know. I try to be just athletic and inconspicuous. So, and when I'm inconspicuous, I can sort of pass better, you know. Anyway, That's a whole other thing. We shouldn't focus on all that stuff yet. Although I guess we should, because Venus enters Gemini April 10th. And some of the things I wrote down about this, right? Inclusion, you can see where I'm going, non-judgment, curiosity, bi curious, attractive intelligence. Yeah. The whole sapiosexual kind of thing, but being attracted to depth, you know, to intelligence. I already said that. Beauty in words, poetry, multiple love affairs, gaining or losing quickly, right? Gaining or losing interest quickly in particular. So, wow, that person is so beautiful. Now I'm over it. you know, Venus in Gemini just wants to taste everything in the candy shop. It needs to have many and varied experiences. So that's where some of the unfortunate stereotypes come from about like being too promiscuous and such. Now, one thing I wrote down as a theme was getting to know and connecting with different kinds of people. So that's sort of the direction that led me in sort of the LGBT right direction. So we do see LGBT issues, particularly trans issues, come up while Venus is in Gemini. So we can probably expect that more during this transit coming up. So an example here, I wrote down a couple. June 23rd through July 17th of last year. So actually, there were some good things too. Right away, North Carolina allowed changing one's legal gender. And then Vermont recognized non-binary people as a legitimate group. But then immediately after that, 5 states enacted state-enforced censorship of LGBT issues. So, that's for people who talk about the First Amendment. Yeah, right. Freedom for me and for my stuff, right? What, you guys are trying to censor me. But you can't say that. That's un-American. And that's not Christian. Oh. Sorry, homie, but other people exist too. Like I said, make America great again basically means let's return to a time when dominant people can abuse weaker people with impunity and marginalized groups, oppressed nationalities and such. You can tell I'm Aquarius rising probably. So then May 9th through June 2nd of 2021, Biden reverses a Trump law allowing that it used to allow healthcare companies to deny care to gay and trans people. So that was a good thing. June of 2004, during Venus in Gemini, was the first trans rights march in San Francisco. I mean, there were other trans events and stuff, but this was the first blatantly, explicitly trans rights march in San Francisco, 2004. Now, fast forward to June, July of 2014, right? Remember Orange is the New Black coming out and making a big stir? Well, remember, Laverne Cox was one of the first big trans actresses. And she was the first openly trans woman to be featured on the cover of Time magazine. And is the first trans person to ever be, or at least, I don't know about anymore, but was the first trans person ever to be nominated for an Emmy. I don't know if any trans people have been nominated after the fact. Maybe Elliot Page. I don't know. So what does this mean for you personally? Be playful and curious. Be open to new ideas. Conversations rather than debates, right? Dialogue. That's quite interesting. Listening, right, to what people have to say. Expressing harmony and inclusion. The thing about Venus in Gemini, I mean, there are terrible assholes with Venus in Gemini, but Venus in Gemini in general is not discriminatory. It is including of many different types of people and can relate to many different walks of life. So now let's finish up here. We're almost done. Saturn conjunct Jupiter in Aries, April 11th. So keywords of the sun here: authority, intelligence, judgment, reputation. Excuse me. Jupiter is prosperity, abundance, the priesthood, relief, freedom, release, teachers, religion, you know. You also see confidence and arrogance and things like that. What about Aries? Aries is impulsive, it's brilliant, it's bold, it's authoritarian, it's boastful. The key word here too, inflated. It's inflated. And what's Jupiter do? It contributes a lot of hot air. It helps inflate things. Mars or sorry, rather Aries and Jupiter together produce this kind of stuff, especially when the sun's there. The sun makes it quite pompous. So the major themes I mentioned here were shameless pomp, right? I know the right way. I am right. I'm the truth. Overreaching authority and inflation, whether it's financial inflation or just inflating our egos, basically. That alarm on the 23rd won't be the last we hear. Have I heard of alarms? Oh, sweetheart, that's a bunch of nonsense. XDS, have I heard of alarms? The world's ending on the 23rd. Might as well be Elizabeth Clare Prophet, the person who popularized the twin flame bullshit. People who predict the end of the world and all this nonsense are typically full of nonsense. People have been predicting the end of the world since humans have been able to predict. We have predictions about the end of the world going back to ancient Mesopotamia, the dawn of civilization. And there's tons of Graham Hancock nonsense out there, pseudo-archaeology, ancient aliens, people who are idiots and or grifters. If we believe a lot of their claims without evidence, believe me, I've got a bridge to sell you. So, mate, the government have announced it. Mate, you're wrong. Mate, the world's not going to end on the 23rd. If it does, glorious. That's wonderful. We all get to experience the cessation of suffering, at least for a time. So, but if it ends on the 23rd, well, it won't matter, will it? But it's a bunch of nonsense. Oh yeah, let me switch off. Yeah, Y2K, more nonsense. There was tons of all this stuff. So I'm very skeptical about things, especially because I've spent 27 years in the occult, and most of it is BS. Most of it's nonsense. The only thing that I found to be of value is investigating consciousness. Regardless of outer circumstances, that doesn't go away. You are still here. The only thing you know for sure is that you are here. Everything else is just happening around you. And it's up to you to face whatever comes, however, is with as much equanimity as we can, but it's whatever is in us. Because all that comes through pain and suffering. And we Americans haven't experienced that as much as a lot of places in the world. So, it's the first UK emergency alarm to be tested on all mobile phones on the 23rd. Oh my God, the world's ending. The world's ending. The sky is falling. I said that yesterday, Chicken Little. The sky is falling. I used to be Chicken Little. I was always talking about the world ending. I got into all this stuff when I was very young. So I was talking about the Mayan calendar when I was like 11, in the 90s. So, and it's a bunch of nonsense. Hell yes, art makes you feel something. It does. It does make you feel something. Anyway, so moving right along through the Sun and Jupiter here. So a major theme, like I said. So go shameless pomp. Think about September in 2016. The very end of September, this was the first debate between Clinton and Trump, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, in the U.S. presidential election, for my international friends. And I know most of this is like U.S. history or U.S. news. I gotta do more world news because there's tons of it, of course, to go over. It's just another thing, not the death of humanity. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not into conspiracy theories. I did them for many years, for 20 years, and typically they're a bunch of bullshit. When Alex Jones says, I got the documents right here, folks. Look here. It's a big pile of nonsense paper. It's random, bills and stuff. A blank piece. I got the documents, folks. Now there are legitimate conspiracies. The Kennedy assassination. I can talk to you all day about that. I did years of research on that. Spoiler alert, it was probably Alan Dulles who masterminded the thing, which was ironic because they put him in head of the Warren Commission. But there's lots and lots of circumstantial evidence, not direct evidence, but, where there's smoke, there's fire. And a lot of factual stuff about it, not theories unsubstantiated with no evidence. It's the same thing about ancient high technology. It's great. If we figure out there was an Atlantis, awesome. Cool, dude. I'll be the first one, like, yeah. There's no evidence until evidence starts emerging. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I'm not going to plan my life around it. And I'm not going to worry about it because there's actual things here to worry about. The economy, inflation, and transphobia is a distraction from the economy, from inflation, from world affairs, from international conflict, from the potential of World War III. I mean, come on. Anyway, you can tell I'm Saturn ruled with all the doom and gloom. So the government knows something we don't. Okay, they know tons of things you don't. Doesn't mean the world's ending. That doesn't make any sense. What's that have to do with the price of tea in China? So anyway, so also while Jupiter was conjunct the Sun, the second debate happened. So it's really interesting. This was all in Libra, which is sort of like debate, deliberation, isn't it? And it was a lot of pomp and inflated egos and inflated nonsense and hot air. Now, this happened again in October 2017. It was in Scorpio. And this is when Harvey Weinstein's abuses of power, his overreach of power, became public knowledge, right? This is when all these tweets and stuff went out from Alyssa Milano. And then, November of 2018, Andrew Gilliam, right, who was the former governor of Florida, conceded the election to Ron DeSantis, who I'm sorry is sort of, known for overreaching power. I mean, what else do you call it when someone tries to ban, Black history in the state and tries to ban any sort of a gender-affirming care? I mean, the overreaching of power, and then trying to tell journalists they have to register with the state in order to criticize or write about him. I mean, not mainstream journalists, but anyone who's a blogger, anyone who's what are they called? Independent media, which there's tons of very good ones on YouTube, right? So that was interesting. And then December 2019, that's when the Trump impeachment trial began. But that's also an instance of Democrats being overinflated because they picked the stupidest charges to go after him with. It was alleging that Trump withheld military aid for Ukraine to get them to release damaging information on Joe Biden, right, to give him a leg up in the election. That's like the least thing they could have picked. Like, you idiots. So they overinflated their own nonsense. And Trump was obviously already overinflated. So now what about you personally? Well, maybe we'll see more inflation in the economy. So let's watch out for that. But be careful of arrogance, hypocrisy, which I do all the time. Being haughty, like holier than thou, or the right way. I am the way, the truth, and the life. What, cat? Dude, I'm almost done. You gotta relax. Chill out, cat. So hypocrisy, being haughty, misplaced confidence, an inflated sense of self-assurance or inflated sense of self. Arrogance is really easy. It takes no effort. You just say, oh, I'm the best. Or, I could do that. I could do that. I could do that. Confidence is hard won through pain and suffering. You have to be able to say, I did that. I can do that because I did it. It comes from real, right? Reality, real experiences. That's confidence. So anyway, moving right along, we have Venus in Gemini, trine Pluto in Aquarius, April 11th. So we talked about keywords of Venus already, beauty, love, sex. Oh, no, 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 no. Pluto is will, power, death, trauma, perversions. I mean, that's like Pluto, Venus. Excuse me. It's known for the darkness, what's hidden, obsession. Oh, it's also wealth, hidden wealth, and hoarding wealth, right? Because it comes from the god Pluto or Pluton, right? Who is the god of precious metals and hidden wealth under the earth. So, anyway, some of the main themes I thought of here were exposing sexual crimes or justice for them, obsessive attraction, the beauty of death, right? Parting is such sweet sorrow. Darker aesthetic, kink, right? Kinky sexuality, power relations, power in sex, right? And we talked about, sexual crime or whatever, the A word, which we'll see things, happen with that. And we need to find lots more examples, but we only have a little bit of time here. So just a couple of them. October 2017, the New York Times publishes their story about Harvey Weinstein, right? About his sexual abuses. Oh, well, we talked about that earlier too, right? So basically exposing his misdeeds. And then in June of 2022, last year, Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in prison for her crimes. So you see how that theme kind of carries on. And there's tons of other ones we have to go over. The Pluto synodic cycle, the conjunctions, the trines, and the squares all sort of coincided with a lot of the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. So that's another thing we should look at some point. Now, well, what does this mean for you, right? It means obsessive attraction, like we talked about. If you're in a relationship, cultivating that same sort of, I think of Morticia and Gomez Adams, that's the perfect image for Pluto trine Venus. Right? That sort of obsessive love, right? It's time to rekindle that sort of passion with our spouses or our boyfriends or girlfriends or non-binary friends or people friends or whatever else. This is a time to express depth in sexuality, right? Like, to try things that are a bit weird, right? Or power exchange or kink. Those are all sort of, you could tell what's on my mind, right? So now, the solar eclipse, new beginnings. We've talked about this before. It's like a supercharged new moon. Jupiter's going to be conjunct. Eclipses were once considered very malefic, but we know they can go both ways. Chris Brennan, one of my heroes, said that eclipses can bring the best and the worst events in our lives. It sounds a bit like Charles Dickens. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. I love Charles Dickens. Very good person. He represented that romantic movement quite a bit. He was a response to the evils of the Industrial Revolution, the coldness, right? The profit. So anyway, you have to look and see what house this eclipse is going to be in for you. And I think we've talked about eclipses in the past, how they work, the lunar nodes, right? How the north node is where the moon intersects the ecliptic going towards celestial north, and the south node is where the moon intersects the ecliptic going down towards celestial south. So we see the orbit of the earth around the sun, and then the moon intersects that orbit at specific places, right? And those are the nodes. And when the nodes align with the sun and or moon, there's an eclipse, right? Within 15 degrees, we'll have an eclipse, at least a partial eclipse. Why is that? Because within 15 degrees is the alignment, is a sufficient alignment for someone to get eclipsed. Someone's getting eclipsed. Anyway, Mercury retrograde in Taurus. So Mercury in Taurus is slow, right? It's very tactile. Learns through touching, through doing. It loves smells, right? Gets attracted to people's smells. Retrograde, it delays things. It makes things take longer. It disrupts communication, turns things on their head, right? They always say avoid certain things with Mercury retrograde. Like what? Negotiations, contracts. These are all mercurial things that have to do with business dealings, right? Because Mercury ruled business. And then communication, agreements, things like that. So that's why they say avoid negotiations or contracts. Basically, finalizing anything, you want to have some good Gemini wiggle room to get out of stuff, you know? Because otherwise, whatever communication was worked out during that time, whatever agreement was worked out, can be turned over on its head. Someone can say, oh, I didn't agree to that, or this isn't what it said, or whatever, or. So, deception, misinformation, lies. Watch out for these sorts of things. I believe Mercury was retrograde during the 2020 election deal. I think so. I have to go back and look. But you see how all that stuff gets delayed. There's all sorts of misinformation and nonsense about this and that. So anyway, but we got to get to your stuff. Oh yeah, people always talk about, people from your past reaching out to you, like exes and all that sort of thing. So that is a phenomenon that people notice, you know. Oh, Mercury goes retrograde on the 29th. Is that the case? Wait, hold on. Were my notes incomplete? I'm typing on my invisible typewriter. You see, I do this all on my laptop and then I send it to myself. Send it to myself. What the hell? What the hell? Well, it doesn't matter because we got to get to your charts. Documents. Astrology of April. Okay, I guess I ended there. But the 29th, I believe that's the 29th. Isn't that the 29th? Isn't that the 29th? Isn't that the 29th? Oh, no, the 29th. Mars sextile Uranus. That's what it was. Mars in Cancer, sextile Uranus. So I won't want to spend a whole lot of time on that because we got to get onto your charts. But, right, this is one of those things that's explosive. With the sextile, I typically expect there to be, again, protests, people rising up against things, people challenging things, maybe, right, um, public disobedience or civil disobedience or non civil disobedience because it's Mars and Uranus. Mars is not happy in Cancer. So this could be egging each other on to do sort of mischief. I really hope we don't have violence, but typically Mars Uranus stuff brings violence. This is a sextile, so maybe it's the resolution or the addressing of some violence. People are talking about assault weapon bans. Yet we have idiots like Ben Shapiro who said that we should just take weapons away from trans people, that will solve crimes, when what? Something like 90% of all the shooters were cisgendered. So how does that affect anything? They all use assault weapons, and these sorts of things, they have no civilian application. And I say that as someone who grew up in a military family and who grew up shooting these sorts of weapons. So anyway, I'm just mentioning that because we could see more action on that front, although I seriously doubt it. But those are the kinds of things I would expect to see. Being that it's Uranus, it could be something out of left field that we're not expecting. So, but April should be an interesting month. I mean, especially the end of this month. So, oh, you know what? I wanted to show you a little picture here. I wanted to show you a little picture. Where is the little picture? Is that it? I think this is it. Oh. It just shows you what I mean about the lunar nodes. Let me see. Can I move this over? Can I move this over? So you see, this is the sun over here. This is the ecliptic, which is actually the plane of the Earth's orbit around the sun, but which appears to us to be the orbit of the sun around the Earth, right? Which we know it's not. We had Galileo and we had Johannes Kepler and all these, famous historical figures that showed us that the Earth did not, or the Earth was not the center of the universe, rather. So you see here, this is the orbit of the moon. And this red dot is where the moon's orbit is intersecting the ecliptic going towards celestial north, right? So that is the north node. And then the space behind it, where the moon intersects the ecliptic going down towards celestial south, is the south node. So when these, right, which are sort of aligned with the Earth, because it's the Earth's orbit, when the moon is here and the sun is there, right, we'll get a solar eclipse when the sun and moon are conjunct, and a lunar eclipse when the Earth and moon are conjunct. So remember, Earth is always opposite the sun, technically, for those of you who want to use the Earth for stuff. In esoteric astrology, you have to use the Earth quite a bit. So anyway, okay, let's see your filthy charts. Who wants to put their chart up? 200%. 200%. What are you, a baseball coach? 200%. Anyone want to put their chart up? Anyone want to put the chart up? Chia. Chart. Oh, I guess not. Well, I can keep talking. Or we can look up some fun events here for Venus and Pluto, or for Uranus and Mars. If no one has a chart, I will pull up the interwebs. The interwebs. Let's see here. Oh no, you know what? Let's pull up solar fire. Solar fire. Solar fire. Solar fire ever after. Solar fire makes things longer. Solar fire ever after. Solar work is never over. Solar fire make it better. Solar fire make Solar fire makes sense faster. So, when was the last time that Mars aspected Uranus? Or made the sextile to Uranus, rather? Let's go back some months. So Mars would have to have been in Pisces. So Mars, where'd you go? Where'd you go, Mars? Gemini. Oh, Mars was in Gemini forever. Okay, Mars is in Pisces now. Oh, here we go. May 3rd. May 3rd of 2022. Let's see. Let's look at this here. News, May of 2022. What happened? This was Mars and Uranus. Father of murdered child pageant. Oh, Jean-Benet Ramsey. The father of Jean-Benet Ramsey requests further DNA tests. That's interesting. United States failed to codify abortion laws into federal constitution. That's not fun. Ooh, inflation, right? Inflation rates. I mean, I'm not excited about it, but oh, here's the good one. Uranus and Mars. Johnny Depp and Amber Heard continue their civil brawl in the courts. It's good. Oh no, the Buffalo shooting. Another racist attack. Another racist attack. Not another trans attack, another racist attack. Gosh, God bless. Well, what happened around this was specifically May 3rd. Oh, right on May 3rd, celebrities dazzled on the Met Gala carpet with the theme of the Gilded Age. I mean, how much hubris is that? Like, let's dress up like the last time wealth inequality was the worst it had ever been. The Gilded Age. So that's quite interesting. What about a time before that? The other thing about Mars Uranus, protests, other protests, May of 2022, abortion protests. So those were going on, of course. In the United States on May 2nd, May 2nd, 2022. Oh, goodness. Politico released the first draft of the majority opinion written by Justice Alito, Samuel Alito. This was the leak. This was the leak of the whole overturning Roe v. Wade thing. Isn't that wild? Like almost to the day. Oh my goodness. Sometimes it's. Now look, you see, Mars is overcoming Uranus. Well, I don't know if we can use ancient aspect doctrine with outer planets, but it's still quite interesting. Uranus is conjunct the sun too, bringing things to light. Good. Where's Mercury here? Mercury in Gemini. Is Mercury aspecting? It's sextile Venus in Aries, unhappy. Well, Venus is unhappy in Aries, right? You know, that's basically um, making women unhappy in a way. You could look at it as Mars trying to control Venus because Venus is in a martial sign. So controlling women's bodies, I guess you could make a case for that too. I mean, technically, Pluto was trine Mercury right before then. So that's another thing. Anyway, that's just quite interesting to me. Oh, excuse me. Well, let's see if anyone put a chart up. Because otherwise I'll just keep looking at a couple things for another little bit. Where's the chat? Where's the chat? Chat, 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 chat. Where's the chat? Oh, there it is. Okay. A word. Harder, better. Faster, stronger. Rolling ever. Our work is never over. I hate the way they just mess that all up with Whopper, Bacon Whopper, Junior Whopper, 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 Jesus Whopper, Donkey Whopper, Bacon Whopper. Something Whopper never over. Anyway, so that's interesting. Oh, you know, we should really look at Pluto Venus. We really should. We should look at Pluto Venus. So let's look at Pluto Venus. Pluto trine Venus, because hopefully that's a little bit nicer. So, well, that's 2021. Let's go further back than that. Let's go further back. Further back. Do 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 do. Okay. Let's go. Let's see. So Venus would have to be in Virgo. Um, why don't we go further back than that? Oh, wait, now it's it's emanating. So Pluto. Well, this is Pluto conjunct Venus. Look at that. But let's go to Pluto in Capricorn and Venus in Virgo. There we go. So what's that? October 2017. Oh, we already talked about that. That's Harvey Weinstein. Let's go back further. Let's like go, I don't know. How far are we going back? Way back. And it goes a little something like this. Hit it. Here's a little gangster, short in size, a t-shirt and Levi's. This is only disguise. Built like a tank, yet hard to hit. Ice Cube and Easy E come running shit. Well, I'm Easy E, the one they're talking about. Anyway, I grew up on NWA. So, I got the first cassette tape of greatest hits when I was in grade school. My older brother gave it to me. Oh, Venus was opposite Neptune here too. That's interesting. Let's go ahead a couple days and let's see what happened here. Where'd you go, Venus? 7 and 7 degrees. Okay. October of 20 news. October of 2012. So usually it's stuff having to do with, you know, sexual stuff. Hugo Chavez wins third term. Wow, that's a long time ago. Goodness. Well, that's a power thing. What specifically about the United States, real quick? Oh, Jerry Sandusky. If anyone remembers that, he was sentenced. Gosh, almost like to the day ish of Ghislaine Maxwell. So Jerry Sandusky, the former Penn State football coach, was sentenced to 30 to 60 years in prison for doing sex crimes to young boys, doing crimes, doing not nice things. Um, he was 68 years old, so he'll obviously die in prison. The ruling came 3.5 months after he was found guilty on 45 counts of abuse of boys. Oh my God. Now, what's quite interesting about these sorts of cases, now this was also Pluto trine Venus. Gosh, to the day, October 9th. Look at this, October 9th. October 9th, you can't see this, but look, October 9th. There we go. Oops. I mean, you could see probably that I had something not, anyway, I don't need to explain myself. But I think most people know that I do other naughty things. So, but anyway, I mean, you see, that's so wild. To the day, Jerry Sandusky. Goodness gracious. Let's look at one more. Goodness gracious. Does anyone remember that thing? That was a big deal. That was a big deal. I was married during that time. That was a big high point in life. Rolling ever, power over. Make it better, make sense longer. Do 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 do. Something work is never over. I love Daft. I cried when Daft Punk broke up. One of my favorite songs is still "One More Time." Oh, do you need to go in? Okay, okay, relax here. Do you need to go in here? Okay, okay. All right. So, oh, goodness. Oh, so anyway, let's look at one more here. So, Virgo, right? We're going to Virgo. Or this is, Pluto is getting closer to Sagittarius here. We'll just do, oh no, we'll do a whole month. But you see the square here. So I believe that Jeffrey Epstein was arrested with the square. Arrested with the square. Or maybe it was Ghislaine Max. I think he was with it. A couple of the things happen with the conjunction, some of them with the square, some of them with the trine. Usually the trine results in like the justice or the sentencing, like we've been looking at here. Like Ghislaine Maxwell. Like, what's his face? Epstein wasn't able to be sentenced, obviously, but there's a whole bunch of weird stuff around his death, I mean, the camera was off and there were no guards. It doesn't take a genius like, well, +1 could equal, I mean, maybe it equals 3, it could equal 3, but it probably equals 2. You know? Anyway, I don't mean to be rude. But that was the square. Ooh, I went too far. I went too far. I went too far. So here we go. July 13th, 2010. July 13th, 2010. Mm-hmm. What happened here? I just look through, these news things, and sometimes Wikipedia has just lists of events, right? So, immigration law, landmark financial regulations, House investigative panel. When was this? July 13th. Uh, yeah, let's see. Let's see. Um, that's weird. Um, oh, here we go. Pope Benedict. When was this? What was the date on this? This is the 9th. Pope Benedict engaged in. Wait. No. Pope Benedict appoints Archbishop Paulus to lead the Legion of Christ, following the previous head who had engaged in abuse and a number of other crimes throughout his career. So there's another, you see, that's the trine once again. Getting rid of that guy. Let's see here. Switzerland. Oh, Switzerland rejects. Oh, Switzerland rejects a request from the United States to extradite Roman Polanski, the film director, to face sentencing charges on unlawful acts with a person underage from 1977. So this was an ongoing thing, but it's interesting once again trying to legally resolve that thing. And then, and then, um, privacy fears. Okay, there's this is to the day. There's a row in the United States about, or a row. What was this written by British people from UK friends? There's a row in the United States about privacy fears connected to an exchange and ownership of gay teenagers. That sounds more like FDR in like East Coast from the 30s. Ownership of a gay teenager's database. Privacy fears having to do with sexuality. Joint United Nations program on HIV/AIDS figures to demonstrate a fall by up to 25% in the prevalence of HIV among young people aged between 15 and 24 in Africa. That's a big thing. Wow. Obama introduced his first national strategy to cut HIV/AIDS. That's pretty interesting. What else? What else? Bastille Day. Bastille Day. What was that? Anyway, I don't want to belabor that. Let's see if anyone's got anything to say. Uh, you're just lazy? Lazy typer? Okay. Pluto square your natal Venus. Rip. Well, let me show you that too. So, this is when Epstein was arrested. It was July 6th, 2019. So let's go ahead some years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. July 6th. Days. No days. Okay. So Pluto. Oh, there wasn't a Pluto. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, it was approaching the opposition, but they were opposed by sign, which is sort of interesting. Was Pluto doing anything else? Was Pluto doing anything else? And Saturn, they're conjunct still. How about Jeffrey Epstein? Oh, here we go. The timeline. The timeline. Time after time. Now, this goes all the way back to 2005, but I'm just going to go more recent. Oh, excuse me. July 6th, 2019, he was arrested. August 10th, 2019, he was found unlived in his cell. So let's go to August, because I remember this was interesting. August 10th. Pluto. Oh, see, it had left the opposition with Pluto, Venus. But that whole little time then, Pluto was, where Venus was going through this by sign opposition to Pluto. July 2nd. That's when they charged Ghislaine Maxwell. July 2nd. That was 2020. 2020. July. Was this when I saw the square? Where'd Venus go? Oh, see, she had just left the trine not too long before that. So we do see these things. And then we know the conviction and we know the sentencing. I swear there was a conjunction in there or a square. Maybe if we have to go back. So how about that Mars Uranus thing? Let's put Mars back a little bit further. How about what, a month for that? A month and some days. Okay. So May, oh, right around my birthday in 2020. That was not, I mean, that was a wild time, you know. Oh, excuse me. Oh, May 2020. I don't mean to yawn, I'm sorry. Oops, no, May 2020. This is 2020. Multiple car dealerships burglarized. Wait, let's go. Oh, protests. Protests. To the day. The Black Lives Matter protests. Oh my goodness. May 26th, and this is May 25th. Ooh, so that is quite wild, isn't it? I participated in those protests. Oh, Ashlyn? Well, we've done you before, but I can pull you up really quick. Ashlyn. Oh, you know what? Let's just pull it up. Open. Open sesame. Ashlyn. Open. Well, there's Ashlyn. Ashlyn. Is that you? Yeah, that's you. Saturn is going through your first house, darling. I think I've talked to you about that before. So, this is a time, I mean, just watch out for health issues too. Like, take it easy on yourself. And you'll probably be a bit depressed and morose for a while. And that's okay. Like, we often get fixated on death. We change a lot, you know. Crawling in my skin. These wounds, they will not heal. So, that kind of stuff. Oops. There we go. So, that kind of stuff. You just got to settle into it because that's going to be the backdrop for a while. At least you're done with you finished your Saturn return 3 years ago. So that's fun. And now you're going through first house. Now you are, let's see how old you are. 2022 minus 1990. Oh, I should be able to do that arithmetic in my head. You're 32. So 36, 35, 34, 33, 32. So you're in the ninth house. You're ruled by Mars. Mars is in your fifth house now. So any transits of Mars are going to be particularly important to you. So Mars will be in your fifth house, making that sextile at the end of the month to your anus. And your anus is in Taurus, so that's your third house. Excuse me, and Mars rules your ninth and your second. So this could be something to do with money and or your spiritual philosophy. But it's something unforeseen and something a bit explosive. But it's more of a positive thing, right? Like you saw the protests and stuff. It's standing up for yourself. Maybe you find yourself in a situation you weren't planning on, or that just suddenly spontaneously arises, and you sort of have to rise to the circumstances. You have to rise to the occasion and stand up for yourself or other people. Uranus oftentimes, um, it forces us to support the underdog. Regardless of who it is, sometimes the underdog is a terrible person or group. I think we've talked about the eclipses already, focusing on your finances. I like the one in the second house for you. I do. Jupiter will be there. Jupiter is your sex benefic. And Jupiter rules your 10th house of career and recognition and your first house. So that's quite auspicious. Now, when Jupiter rules your first house and is in the sixth house, often you see people who just work too much, or they don't see that they don't have a work-life balance, and they need to work on a work-life balance. They don't see it. They don't notice it. Or they don't notice their enemies. They're a little oblivious to that stuff. But well, you know, there's reception, mutual reception by sign between the Sun and Jupiter. It's a bit wide to be the trine by degree, but you could definitely call the trine by sign. So there's definitely reception. There's definitely reception. So that sort of improves. That sort of improves the career situation, or your reputation, how well known you are. But then you have Mars, who rules your second house, like opposite your Sun, who rules the sixth house. So that damages your financial position a bit. And Mars is retrograde, so money's not as great as it could be. Perhaps losses and things like that. Or maybe you're just anxious about money because the moon's in the second house in Aries. Like, you're worried about money even though maybe you don't have to be. I don't know. So, Jupiter going through the third house. If you have anything, now Jupiter's going to be here for a year, starting in May, going till the next May, and or the following May, whatever. And this is going to be great for content creation. If you do any of that, writing, speaking, that sort of stuff, making media, making Christmas, da 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 la la, right? So, and then also you could see benevolence or harmonious stuff, luck with your siblings or extended family, cousins, uncles, aunts, that kind of stuff. But mostly, and it can be it can have things to do with school, with finishing up exams or tests or finishing a degree or finishing any, whatever, professional training, that sort of stuff. Oh, excuse me. Ah, I'm so sorry. Goodness gracious. Underground activism on the rise again. Yeah, totally. Protesting is pretty much outlawed in the UK. NHS is on its knees. Yeah, I've heard about that. Postcode lottery for treatment. That is so screwed up. Affluent postcode. See, now it's just capitalism again. Affluent postcodes equal treatment. And impoverished postcodes left to it. Yeah, and this is why class is the biggest thing. This is why I'm a bit of a political activist over here. At least I was. I haven't been very active lately, but it's class. Class is the big thing. That's the big divider. And the screwed up thing about the United States is we've totally eradicated class and class analysis and discussions about class. What we've done is substituted this whole culture war. It started in the 50s, really the 1950s with Allen Dulles, the Dulles brothers, right? Who basically got free reign under President Eisenhower. They did whatever they wanted. That's why when Eisenhower left office, he said, "Beware the military-industrial complex." Because he allowed it to happen. And he didn't become aware of it. He went to sleep during his presidency. He was playing golf in Palm Springs, taking pictures. Meanwhile, Allen Dulles, head of director of Central Intelligence, the first one, and his brother, John Foster Dulles, who's the Secretary of State under Eisenhower, they got together and started toppling governments all over the world that tried to do anything for their people under the guise of fighting communism. But what did they do? They were promoting the interests of major corporations. They overthrew Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala. For what? For United Fruit Company, right? For bananas. They overthrew a whole country and their leader for bananas. Chile, right? We overthrew Salvador Allende, one of my heroes, also a brother Mason, and put in Augusto Pinochet. I mean, that was under Richard Nixon, but it was the same sort of policy. Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran. He was a progressive leader in the 1950s. And again, he was overthrown by one of FDR's, I think, grandsons, Kermit Roosevelt. Crazy. His name is Kermit. But you see, it wasn't, I won't say we, because I didn't do anything. But the United States was toppling governments around the world for what? For capital interests, for business interests. Right? And then there's this whole book everyone should read. It's called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Basically how they extorted these countries, especially in Latin America, for political purpose, for financial purposes, for market value, for companies to have access to their resources. So, and this was all happening during the Neptune-Pluto sextile, you see, which goes on until 2030 something. So this sort of gives us an indication to how this cycle began with, the 1950s and the Korean War. The Korean War was the same thing. It was fighting against a democratically elected leader, Kim Il-sung of Korea, right? And eventually that became, North Korea and South Korea, or the DPRK, Democratic Republic of Korea, and then the ROK, or the Republic of Korea. So anyway, you see all this stuff that happened over that period of time. It's pretty wild. And now we're suffering the fallout from all that nonsense, which, led to a unipolar world with the United States at the head. But now we're leading to a pretty difficult decline. You see? And when you've done other things to countries like we have over the course of 80 years, other countries are less enthusiastic about helping you, right? If we were smart right now, we'd be making overtures to the ascendant emergent powers, which in particular is Russia, right? Like Germany and European nations are already starting to like get uncomfortable with the tension on both sides because people are starting to see the writing on the wall, right? It's the same thing that happened with the UK. Kermit, I know, right? In the UK, World War One, Britain was still the empire. World War Two, Britain was still the empire, right? Churchill, Winston Churchill was adamant about preserving the empire. And what happened? I mean, India first, Indian independence. Very interesting because Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, or his real name was Mohandas Gandhi. He was given the name Mahatma by theosophists, most likely. And he was briefly a theosophist. He credited Annie Besant, who was the leader of the Theosophical Society when Gandhi was involved in Indian independence. He credited Annie Besant with being the driving force behind Indian independence, or being an inspiration for it, for being a big supporter of it, right? And I mean, she was a big supporter of women's suffrage. She was a socialist, right? She was progressive in terms of economics. She was British, Annie Besant, or Annie Besant. Really an amazing woman. So check that out. Now, Gandhi first read the Bhagavad Gita because she told him he should. He recommended it to him. So that's other interesting stuff. Now, so that's also what started the dissolution of the British Empire. And then there was some currency crises, right? There was the pound sterling crisis and all this other sort of thing because their currency started being devalued. So we can see from history that'll probably happen to the United States, but Britain had a lot more support from the West than we may have at some point. So that's a difficult little thing, isn't it? Any other questions, charts, or things to bring up? You had to take some time out too, but needs must. Yeah. Unite and fight over divide and conquer. That's why class is so important because, the working class, people have to sell their labor for a wage. They outnumber, right? We outnumber the ruling class. That's why every attempt is made by governments throughout history to protect the minority, right? So, capitalist production was supposed to be a step up from feudalism, and it is. But then the contradictions inherent in it start to emerge over time. I mean, they've been emerging for hundreds of years, but excuse me, almost immediately, because Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776, and then Karl Marx, 1850, 1875, when he wrote Capital. When did Marx write Capital? 1867. Okay, so 1867. But you see, I mean, it's been a long time. Not quite 200. So, critiques of capitalism happened almost right away, though, because we had the French Revolution and the Paris Commune. So that's what I mean. They experimented with everything when Pluto was in Aquarius. They even experimented with communes. So who knows what sort of interesting stuff we're going to see coming up here, Oh, goodness gracious. Well, we should probably call it a day because I'm starting to get hungry. And it's been 2 hours, and we actually didn't even do anyone's charts, which, kind of cool. Oh, well, we did Ashlyn's, kind of. But that was sort of just a thing. So anyway, please like the stream if you didn't like the stream, And then I love you so much, and thank you for supporting me. And, tell people, and tell your friends, tell your wife. Because everyone's watching me up in here, or they should be, They're interested in astrology, current events, or the occult or religion or anything like that. So, anyway, I love you very much.